Alright folks, and welcome to the channel. And in this video we're going to do a bit of a mix overview. We've not done one for a while, so let's check this out. Yeah, this song, these multi-track, part of a course, mixing course if you will, or a mixing club or community if you will. It's called the Frightbox Mix Crit, and it's run by Torres from FrightboxRecording. What we do every month is we get a new song to mix, and what he encourages people is to put their own stamp on it. It's not one of these mixing courses where it's like do as I do. It's not cookie cutter mixing, if you will. It's like, this is what I've done to mix this song up. Use some of these techniques if you want. If you don't, then don't. Put your own stamp on each particular mix in each month. I'll leave a link to the Frightbox Mix Script down in the description. At the moment, it's closed for new entrants, but you can go on a waiting list. This track is quite a brutal one. It's extreme metal bordering on grindcore, if you will. We've done a technical death metal one, we've done more of a hard rock one that's got some metal elements in there. Put this mix up in the Facebook group. Bobby encouraged me to do a mix breakdown, so I thought I would. So what I'll do first is I'll play a little bit of the track, and then we'll go through the mix, and then I'll play the full mixed and mastered track right at the end, and I'll give you my thoughts.
They will make cemeteries, their cathedrals, and tombs your cities. So, as you can hear, that's a pretty brutal track. The band that did that track is a band called Cemeteries. Unfortunately, they're no longer about. Now, when I was doing the static mix, I've not watched any of Bobby's videos yet, so I've got a static mix, listened to the song a few times, knew where I wanted to go. I thought, yeah, I want it sounding old school, wanting the more sort of, still a little bit of polish on there, but wanting the more natural, raw, brutal sound, if you will. Yes, I'm into all that sort of good old grindcore stuff. Repulsion, Terrorising, Napalm Death, Brutal Truth, Carcass, all that good old stuff. I decided to go with some, if you will, some old school processing and some old school sounding plugins, if you will, just to add that little bit of old school character. So we'll play the drums in the raw form. These were recorded at North End Studios. It's in the same building as Bobby's studio, but it was just in a different room. Yeah, pretty decent sounding drums. So I'll switch all the processing back on and we'll go through what we've got on there. So first off, on the kick, I went with the SSL E channel from Waves Audio. I did try the G channel, and I have got the actual SSL channel from Solid State Logic as well, but I decided to go with this. It got me where I wanted to go pretty quickly. So I'll go through the processing we've got on there. I've not got a high-pass filter in there because that's taken care of on the submix. We've filtered everything out above 12K. I've taken a little bit out, well, taken quite a bit out at 300 Hz, just to take a bit of the boxiness. Excuse you. Bit of the boxiness out of that kick drum. We've just got a bit of 6K and a bit 6.7K just to help it cut through the mix a little bit. And a little bit of a compression on there as well. It looks quite heavy-handed, but yeah, with the SSL type stuff, you can be a little bit more heavy-handed than what you would with some other compressors. No gate on there at all, and that's everything on the channel strip. After that, I have got another little compressor in there. I've got the SSL Master Bus channel. Now, I'm not using this for any compression at all. But let me just play a little sample again, and you see how little the needle is moving. You see it's moving very little. We're not doing any compression at all. This is more for, say, a bit of makeup gain, bit of volume. It's not adding a whole lot of volume, but it's just helping the kick drum through a little bit more, because there was, when I was getting so far into the mix, I was sort of losing the kick drum in places. So this is a trick I use every now and again. And you see, we've got a slow attack, fast release, 2-to-1 ratio, and just some makeup gain. That's all it is. A volume boost, or even acting a little bit like a clipper, if you will. And that's all the processing I've got on the kick drum. Now, we have got one snare sample in here, as well as the actual snare from the actual kit itself. On the first thing we've got on the snare sample is his multi-transient. All I'm using this for is just helping that snare just cut through, just giving it a little bit of a boost, if you will. Same again, I did try the G channel, but I eventually went with the E channel again. There wasn't much in it. They sound pretty similar, they're just slightly different characteristics, but I was just happier with the E channel. On the E channel, we've got everything filtered out below 70 Hz, and again, everything above 12K. Same again, we've just taken that little bit of boxiness out in the lower mids, around about 300 Hz again, but we've taken a little bit out again, a bit more out at 1K in the upper mids, just to that frequency was just a bit, just annoying me, if you will. And I'm just giving it a little boost at 8K just to brighten up the snare a bit. It was just need a brightening up. And before I forget, the actual snare sample is one of Bobby's snares he's got in the studio. It's just of an old Yamaha snare. We're a bit more heavy-handed on the compression there, and with this being a snare sample, no gate is needed. And that's all processing we've got on that snare sample. And that is being sent to a reverb and this snare key, which we'll come back to that in a little while. So on the actual drummer snare, it's basically the same processing. It's the same processing, just slightly different frequencies. So we've got the multi-transient again. The frequency was slightly different to get that attack through. We're using that for exactly the same thing, just to give it a bit more attack and a bit more oomph. Use the SSL again, the E channel, everything above below 70 and above 12K taken out. Same again, that round about 300 Hz, just above 300 Hz this time. Yeah, that sort of snare boxiness to it. This time we've taken out a bit of 1.6K and just raised a bit of 8K again, just like I say, just to make it a bit more brighter, because you've got some brutal guitars and some brutal bass on this. So my mindset was just to make the snares a little brighter. Now, similar processing on the compressor, not quite as heavy-handed, but yeah, still a bit of compression on there. We have got a gate on. It's not doing a great, it's just doing a little bit, because it's such a fast song, and there's a lot of blast beats in there. Yeah, you still get a little bit of bleed through from the cymbals. I was finding if I took it a little bit too far, yeah, it wasn't sounding natural. And same again, that's all the processing we've got on there. Just those two plugins. Now, I've got a little bit more processing on the snare bottom mic. So for a bit of saturation, just using the red light distortion plugin. This is stock plugin in Studio One. Very tiny amount of saturation. Got it on the soft tube. It's not distorting it. It's just adding a little bit of saturation. And for the snare bottom mic, because we've got the body of the snare from the other two snares, all I was using this for was a bit of top end sizzle. So I filtered everything out below 1K and just notched a bit of 2K out, because that was a little bit annoying. Now we have got a gate in there, because getting a bit of bleed from the kick drum that was making the snare wires activate, because obviously it's a kick drum that's actually been sidechained from that snare key. First time I've used this trick, seemed to work. Yeah, you're still getting a little bit of that snare rattle through, but it's not too bad. It was a lot worse without that gating, I'll tell you that. And then just a little bit of compression in there. It looks like quite heavy-handed, but because you're filtering a lot out, sometimes you do need to be a little bit heavy-handed, but it worked. I was happy with how it sounded, and yeah, same as with the other two snares, that's going off to the reverb. Now, we've only got two toms on this. We've got a rack tom and a floor tom, and we've got just one plugin on here, and this is the actual solid slate Logic SSL. All we're doing there on this is the rack tom. We're taking everything out above 80 hertz and taking everything out above 10k. And it's the same again, we're just filtering some of that boxiness out at around about 500 hertz and just giving a little bit of a boost at 7k and just some compression in there. And then if we look on the floor tom, as you can see, we're using the SSL again. We've got the same high and low pass filters in there, just dipping out a little bit higher this time, around about 670 hertz, and we're doing a little boost at 4k, and then we're doing that same boost again at 7.5k, and just a little bit of compression. And then we've got a couple of overhead mics here, a stereo pair. So I've got the same processing on both, so I'm only going to show you one. So for a bit of saturation, I've got this P&M analoger. I just bought it a couple of weeks back and I thought I'd try it out on this track. Yeah, and it was doing what I wanted it to do. Pretty easy to use, just to darken those mics up a little bit. And because I was using this mainly for the snares on the EQ, got everything filtered out below 1k and just taking a little bit of 2.46k. Now, because I'm not bussing these off to a submix, I didn't do that with any of the cymbals on this track. I've got a little bit of compression going on here, but all that's doing is when the drummer's hitting the cymbals a little bit harder, it's just clamping down on those a little bit, 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction. That's it. On the hat and the ride, this is the ride, we've got very, very similar processing. We've got the analoger on the ride, EQ taking everything out below 600 hertz and just dipped a little bit out at 2.8, and then we've got that same compressor. On the hats, exactly the same. Analoger, bit higher up on the high pass filter, 670, 80, around about 2.8 again, and again with that same compressor. And then we've got this mono overhead. With this one, I wanted it to be a bit more, if you will, a bit more lo-fi sounded. So to start off with, I did use the analoger, but the V2 of the head crush came out while I was mixing this, because I got the V1. This was a free upgrade, so I thought, oh, I'll download that and I'll give it a try on this mono overhead. Yeah, give me what I wanted. It's I don't like the head crusher. You can give it sort of subtle saturation, or it can just absolutely destroy everything. On this one, yeah, just quite a lot of distortion, but it's not really distorting. It's just giving it a bit of gnarliness to the mic, that mono overhead mic. And after that, just to give it that sort of more lo-fi vintage sound, all we're using is this mid-range. So take everything out below 270, everything above just over 4k, just dipped a little bit out at 480. And got a bit of compression going on there as well. This was a tricky bobbies that I've never used before, but I thought, give it a go. And I like what it was doing. So I'm using this reverb from Waves Audio again. And we're not using the direct sound. All that you're hearing on this mono over mic is the reverb. You're not getting any of the direct sound at all. And yeah, I like what it was doing, so I left it in. And then after that, we've got a couple of room mics just to saturate things a little bit again, using the same analogue, the EQ, just taking everything out below 160 Hz just to make room for the actual direct kick mic, and taking everything out above 7k because the cymbals are being taken care of by the overhead mics. This is another trick of Bobby's. I thought, yeah, I'll give it a try out just to give the room mics a bit of delay from the direct mics. And I like what it were doing. Now, at first, I used this groove delay in Studio One. Wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So I used the Nembrini analog rack. Yeah, this was doing what I wanted it. So we went with that one. And then we've got all the shells going to a submix. And on the submix, first thing we've got up is a bit of compression. And I do like this plugin. This is the Sominus 2 Co. It's great for that parallel drum compression because it's got that wet dry knob at the bottom there, and that mix knob. It saves you having to do another submix for that parallel compression. You can just use it on the main drums. But with these drums, I didn't want to give them that over-compressed sound. So on the wet dry, we've just got it at 35%, a little bit of drive. I didn't really sort of mess about with the release, just raise the amount of compression and output, and I went with the slow attack. Now, I am going to do a video on this plugin at some point. I will, I promise, because I do use it quite a lot. And next, after that, we've got some EQ. We're just taking out all that sort of muddiness below, sort of 40 hertz, just all those sub-frequencies that the human ear doesn't pick up. And we're just notching a couple of bits and bobs out there in the mid-range. Was making things a bit boxy. And then I was going to use the virtual tape machine from Slate Digital. It wasn't quite doing what I wanted it to. So I pulled up the RM2 analog channel from Audio Assault, and yeah, this is based on an old Japanese console. It just gives things a little bit of character to it. I think that's the default setting on the drive. I left that, didn't touch the inputs or outputs. All I did was just raise a little bit of the low end and a little bit of the top end. That's everything I had on the drums channels, apart from what we've got on the master fader. So with all the processing on, these are what the drums ended up sounding like on their own. So that's everything I've got on the drums. Right, so bass. We've got two bass tracks here. We've got a bass DI and a big muff DI. So without any of the processing on, these are what these two sound like together. Pretty gnarly sounding to start off with. So first plugin I've got on the bass DI is the TSC Bass Overdrive, and I absolutely love this program, love this plugin. All we've got on there is I've left the drive as it was, just brought the level up a little bit and raised a little bit of the lows and the highs. There's no mids button on this, left it at 100% blend and left the presence as it was. EQ wise, filtered out everything below 64 Hz just to make room for the kick drum, and everything above 4K. Just taking a bit out in the in those lower mids, because I just found that there was a bit of a build up there between the two basses on the lower mids, and just boosted a tiny amount at 85 Hz just to help the bottom end and give it a bit of a boost. And then we've got the API 2500 compressor on there, compressing up to about -12 dB, and yeah, didn't really sort of mess about with that too much. And then just to help control that the extra hard hits that you get with using the pick, just use the Loud Max limiter. On the Big Muff DI, Bobby went with a guitar amp plugin. Now, it's not something I've done before, so I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. I've not got the one that he used, so I'll just pick one of the ones I've got. So I went with Hell Beast. I've got it on this sort of lower gain channel. I've just got the gate going off in front. On the amp itself, just taking a little bit of the gain out just to sort of smooth things off a little bit. Left the bass down the middle, just raised a bit of the mids up and taking a bit of the treble out, and just knocked a bit of presence down as well. And the cab I used was just the standard Hellbeast 4x12, and just took a bit of the low end out as well. On the EQ, didn't use any delay or reverb on there. And this is quite heavily distorted. All I wanted this for was that sort of mid-range. So take everything out above 3.5K, 3K, and everything out below 300 hertz. And we've got that same compressor and Loudmax Limited doing the same job as it was on the main DI track, just to keep everything under control. And with that process on, the bass sounds like this. And I was quite digging that sound, so we went with that. It's got that sort of little bit gnarliness to it, which I like. So, right, so on to guitars next. As you can see, we've got 6 tracks. Now, I'm only actually using these 4 tracks. Yeah, I've got the Grindstein in there. I was just using that, just using it to test that out. So I'll put a mix up of that in the Frightbox mix script. So by the time this video goes out, the people in that group will have heard that mix as well as the original mix. Well, these are just 2 2DI tracks, and what Bobby did was use these 2DI tracks to reamp them through 5152, and then apparently the guitar player liked the HM2. That's another reason why I tried the Grindstein out. Used the HM2 in front of that. So let me just switch all the processing off. So this is just a 5150 on its own. And this is the HM2s on their own. Yeah, pretty nasty sounding. So the processing that we've got on there, so all I've done is sort of, same again, sort of just use it for that mid-range. So I've filtered everything out below 126 hertz, just taking a lot of that sort of low-end muddiness out, and taking a lot of the fizziness out of the top end, and just dipped a little bit out at 440 hertz. Bit of compression in there. Now, I was finding, and Bobby was saying, that he just wanted a little bit of separation between the sort of 2 guitar sounds. He used a delay, which I did try out. I wasn't finding it was making much difference. When you sort of dive down, the guitars aren't that much out of phase, but they're just slightly out of phase. Not by much. Not that it's making a lot of difference. But what I decided to do was I decided to flip the phase on the HM2s, and that's all the processing I've got on them. And then with that little bit of processing on the HM2 sound like this. Still pretty gnarly sounding, but they are quite low down in the mix. And then all 4 of them tracks are bussed off to a guitar submix. Now on the submix, at first I was going to go with the Pro EQ, which is the stock EQ in studio one, but it was the same again with the drums. I wanted that sort of vintage feel, vintage character. So I went with the SSL, and we filtered everything out below 80 hertz. And because the guitars are quite fizzy, with the low pass filter, I've been quite heavy handed here. We've taken everything out above 5.8, 5.7K, and just notched a little bit out of the mids and a little bit out of the upper mids, and that was all I did on there. And after that, just got another little EQ in there just to take a little bit of that sort of the low mids, if you will. Try and tame things down. It was still getting a bit of build up in those lower mids, so use the API 550 just to take a little bit out at 200 hertz. And then after that, we've got the C4 in the sort of Andy Sneak trick just to take care of those palm mutes. So we'll play a little bit of the guitars again, and I'll find some of the palm mutes. And palm mutes towards the end of the song. So yeah, I was quite digging what was happening with the guitars. And as you see, them's the only two sub-mixers we've got. I did, like I said earlier, I did think about bussing the bass off to the to a sub-mix, but I was happy with how the bass sounded, so I left it alone. So that's everything I've got on guitars. So next we'll move on to vocals, and we've just got one vocal track. There's no overdubs, there's no supplemental vocals on here. So let's have a listen to how the raw vocals sound.
Boy to the suffering, go to the pain.
So yeah, he's a pretty aggressive vocalist. And he's not one of these that's got that high screaming type growly voices. It's that really guttural vocal style. And I quite like that vocal style. So the first thing we've got on is the P&M analogue, just to add an extra little bit more sort of saturation to his voice, if you will. We've got that set to a tube saturation. Yeah, we've been quite conservative again on the settings on there. And then after that, I'm just using the Arvox from Waves just for a bit of compression. Nothing too extreme on there either. I think we were getting around about between 6 to 10 dB of gain reduction. And on the EQ, we filtered out everything below 150 hertz just to keep the vocals out the way of the guitars, drums, and the bass. With him not being a sort of over the top, sort of high shrieky, extreme vocalist, there was really no need to have a low pass filter in there, but we just needed to take some of the boxiness out of his voice at 350 hertz, and again a little bit out again at 700 hertz, 800 hertz, and just took a little bit out at 7.6k. That was a little bit harsh, and yeah, just to clean his vocals off, if you will. And then after that, we've got a second compressor. This is just sort of leveling things off. Just got about 6 dB of gain reduction here. This is just the stock compressor in Studio One. Now, this next one, it does say compressor. We're not using it as a compressor. There's a default setting in there called de-esser. So we're using this as a de-esser. It's not doing any gain reduction at all. It's just stamping down on those sibilances. And then just a bit of a limiter in there just to tame the peaks down, just to keep everything at a level. And then we've got two sends in there. One's on all the way throughout the song, and the other one is automated on certain words. And I'll go through the automation towards the end of the mix. We've got some on the drums as well. So with the delay on and all the processing, his vocal sound like this.
Boy to the suffering, go to the pain.
On the main sort of delay we've got on the vocals, it's just an analog delay. Stock one in Studio One. I've set it to a quick echo, around about 50% wet. We've just taken the top end out and dipped a little bit out in the mid-range. I wouldn't say it exactly polishes his vocals up a bit, yeah, but it just cleans it up a little bit. And yeah, in solo, that delay does sound not quite over the top, but it just gives it a bit of delay in there. But with the context of the mix, you don't really notice it too much. Only one vocal track, so there was no need to bust this off to a submix. That just went straight to the main master fader. So right at the beginning of the track, we've got this little sample, and it's from a film called Demons.
They will make cemeteries, their cathedrals, and tombs, your cities.
So what I wanted to do with that was sort of give it that lo-fi radio sound, so it's coming from a radio. And all I used on that, I've just got this one plug-in, it's the Shep's Omni channel. And there's a setting in there called vocal radio. And I didn't change anything at all in there. I was happy with how that sounded. So with the Shep's Omni channel, it sounds a little bit like this.
They will make cemeteries, their cathedrals, and tombs your cities.
I was happy with how it came out. I just left it at that. So next we'll move on to effects, the master channel, and what little bits of automation we've got on there. So all we've got is 3 effects channels. So we've got reverb for the drums, and all I'm using is the stock reverb in Studio One, just set to a small room. And all we've done with that is just notch a little bit out at 250 hertz. And we've already looked at the main delay we've got for the vocals, but then we've got this supplemental delay on the vocals as well, just on certain words. So we'll have a look at the automation on the vocals. So we've just got it on a couple of words. So let's just solo them out.
Dark light!
There, and then we've got this one here as well.
Stop playing God!
Just on certain words, just to bounce that delay about a little bit. And then before we move on to what we've got on the master channel, the other bit of automation I've got on is on the snare sample. Is just some volume automation, because it's a snare sample. If you just leave everything at one single volume, it's going to sound a little bit fake, a little bit robotic. So without that automation on, and with the automation on, so it's not a lot, it's just give or take around about 2 dB, just to make it sound more natural, along with the actual drummer with his snare. Oh, we'll have a look what we've got on the master fader. So first up, we've got this mix rack from Slate Digital, and we're just using the mix bus just for a little bit of character, and we're using this EQ as well, just to add a bit of air in the top end. This is a shelf rather than a boost. And then after that, using the virtual tape machine from Slate Digital again. I quite like this one. I have got 1 or 2 other tape machines. After that, we've got the Waves SSL Master Bus Compressor. All we're doing on this is just getting about 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction, slow attack, auto release, little bit of makeup gain, and a 2-to-1 ratio. So we'll have a look and see what gain reduction that's doing. So, as you can see, just around about 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction. The last thing we've got on the actual master chain, the SSL GEQ. And I just felt was a little bit of muddiness in certain areas. And all we've done here, we've taken a dB out at 220 hertz, another sort of dB at 600 hertz, another dB at around about 2.83k, just in that sort of mid-range where you can get a bit of build-up of muddiness. On the master fading post, yes, there is the loud max, but all I'm using there, that's just to bring the volume up of the overall mix while I'm mixing it. And as soon as I'm done and I'm ready to render it down to master, all I'll do then is just switch that off and then go to mix down and render it down to a WAV file. Let's have a look at what I did in mastering. So in Studio One, they have what they call the project page, where you can do mastering of one song or multiple songs. Like say if you're doing an album or an EP. All I've got on here is one plugin, we've got one plugin, but it's doing a couple of little things. So all I'm using is Ozone 9 from Isotope. Yeah, it's not the cheapest plugin you'll ever buy, but it works and it's good. You can go on various websites like Plugin Boutique. They sometimes have offers on plugins like this. Now this isn't the full blown version. So there's 3 different versions. I've sort of got the middle one. For what I use it for, it's spot on. I don't need any more for the work that I do. So all we're using on here is a bit of multi-band compression. They've called it dynamics. All it's just doing is just stamping down on a little bits here and there just to keep things under control. And if you've not got this, something like a multi-band compressor like the C4, if you've got that, or any multi-band compressor, will do exactly the same thing. And then after that, we've got the maximizer. So I've set a ceiling at just to keep control of the peaks, and then threshold of negative 9.5 just to raise the volume up. We've got some dithering on there. Some people use dithering, some people don't. It doesn't really make much difference. Let's just play a little bit of the song with Ozone on. That, as you can see, it's just stamping down on things in the mid-range and that lower end. There wasn't a lot going off at this top end here. So that's everything I did to mix and master the song. So don't make a cup of tea, it's only a minute and a half long. Play the song now, and then I'll give you my thoughts at the end.
They will make cemeteries, their cathedrals, and tombs your cities.
So, yeah, that's mixing extreme music, grindcore, whatever you want to call it, in Studio One. What I did, I had absolute fun mixing this track up. Absolute, but like I say, I'm into all this grindcore stuff anyway. It's in the ballpark of what I like. I think I mixed the full, mix and mastered the full track over a couple of nights. It just came together. I won't say like that, but yeah, fairly easily. I knew what I wanted to start off with. I knew where I was going. Well, if you know where you're going, it makes your life a lot easier. As you see, the mix itself was, I had everything set up quite simple. Only a few plugins on each channel, apart from the vocals. I think you were only talking 2 to 3 plugins, 4 at the most on each channel. And I'll leave a link to the Frightbox mix kit down in the description. And if you're interested in mixing songs like this up, not just this, sort of technical death metal, sort of rock and metal, general rock and metal, you sign up to that and get yourself on the waiting list for when it next opens back up. But if you're a solo artist or a band that are looking for somebody to mix and master your track, or you just want somebody to mix your track and send it somewhere else for mastering, and you like what I'm doing, then hit me up. There's an email down in the description where you can get hold of me, or you can click on my YouTube page and it's there in the About sections too. So let me know what you guys think about this down in the description, and we'll catch you on the next video. Right folks, I hope you enjoyed that video. You can follow me on social media and you can get my music online, and if you want to support the channel, there's Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal links. They're all down in the description. Click up here to subscribe and click the link down there for videos that you may not have seen. Keep it loud and keep it heavy.